Welcome again to Global Supply Chain Week. I'm LaRocco, Senior Editor of Guests at CNBC, as well as columnist for American Shipper. Joining me now to discuss Christmas in January is Brett Rose. He is CEO of United National Consumer Suppliers. Good afternoon, Brett, and thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Lorianne. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. All right, for folks out there who are not aware of your company, can you briefly tell the audience?
Sure. We are a 20-year-old wholesale distribution company, and our primary focus has always been to the off-price retail world, which in a post-pandemic, post-recession era, these days everybody is a little bit off-price to accommodate the consumer.
Exactly, and some companies to note are TJ Maxx, Macy's, Marshalls, as well as the Amazon third-party sellers, which I know is how much of your business. It's quite a large portion.
Absolutely. It's about 25% of our business. And as the business grows, that segment grows as well, because as you know, they add third-party resellers daily.
Exactly. And we actually had a chance to have a nice conversation in terms of Christmas products coming in, even right now in February. And we were talking about the late arrival, if you will, of these products. The first chart that I want to show the audience is Easter. While we still have Christmas trees coming in, we do have Easter products still coming in. And for those that are Catholic and follow the Lenten calendar, it's just around the corner. Brett, when you looked at the chart, and it kind of takes you through the ebbs and flows all the way to 2017, what did it strike you in terms of looking at the containers still coming in, as well as what you're hearing and seeing from your clients in terms of needs and wants as it relates to Easter products?
Absolutely. And Easter is probably the first major holiday where the consumer may feel a lull. When you've got containers going from 6 weeks to 15 or 16 weeks to arrive, the traditional retail model has that stuff arriving, mid Q1. So all of a sudden, as the consumer, you're going to buy the product, and the selection is far less, right? There is the traditional retailers who plan far ahead are going to have a serious problem. The retailers that perhaps may pack away, take advantage of excess inventory last year. You still have some people with products from the tariff front loading. Those retailers are positioned great. It's interesting, as a father of an 8 and 9-year-old, we started way early this year getting online to find stuff for the Easter basket, where we may have in the past ordered it, the first week of April. But we know as a consumer, there's going to be a shortage and out of stocks. So the retailers need to do everything they can to fill that vacant space on the shelf.
In our conversation, you were discussing how, you're helping supplement supermarkets as it relates to both, Christmas and, of course, Easter time. Another chart that we have here is Albertsons, which shows their seasonal imports. And when you look at 2021, it is down compared to 2018. 2018, of course, we all know there was significant front loading, so it's kind of hard to really justify that as a norm. But even 2019 and even 2020, it was up significantly. What are you seeing from the various different sectors that you help supply? What are you seeing in terms of inventory throughout that retail gamut?
So I think grocery stores is an interesting segment, right? If you carve it out, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of doors domestically alone. And traditionally, a grocery store, you could obviously go in and get your groceries, but there was a small pet aisle. There may have been some stationery if you needed crayons for your kids. But, as the Walmarts and all the superstores really took over, supermarkets had to start a few years ago really shifting to supplement, when she's coming in to buy dinner, you've got to be able to supplement what the purchases are. Now, in the middle of this pandemic, you only want to go out as little as you have to. And I think grocery stores, especially as they became, essential frontline stores that were able to stay open when other stores closed, they had to be all things to everybody. They had to have an end cap of toys that before may have been, a 3-foot space on one shelf. They had to have much more stationery. The grocery stores, I'm in South Florida, so you walk into Publix, you see electronics, you see stuff the round circle light that everybody's using for Zoom, because they had to be something, they had to have stuff. Your kids are going back to school virtually. Where are they going to buy those products? The other thing worth mentioning is, and I briefly touched upon it, to be all things to everybody, right? You no longer, at least right now, the consumer, they don't want to pack up the kids and go walk the mall. They don't want to pack up the kids and go browse up and down the aisles. They want to get in and get out. So you have to do grocery shopping once a week or twice a week, or for my house, sometimes it seems like 5 times a week. But while you're there, if you can fill your other needs, it serves a huge purpose. And I think some grocery stores, Albertsons has a great business model, because Albertsons has always been, besides being a huge behemoth of a grocery chain, they always had enough general merchandise peppered in, and they had the supply chain already in place. So they were able to take advantage of perhaps some of the canceled containers or goods that were already here from the retailers that closed.
And you've touched upon it several times, in this discussion that, having good warehousing, having a good supply chain is key. Supply chain management is being tested. Logistics are being tested with this congestion. 99-cent stores. You and I, we talked about this. It's a tough time. A lot of parents may not be able to go to a Godiva or go get Lindt chocolate. They may be going to the 99-cent store to fill their baskets this year. When you're looking at their imports, they are down by units by more than double. But I know you were talking to me about 99-cent store. They're actually one of the lucky ones, correct? They actually have warehousing capacity.
99-cent store is a fantastic model. As I'm sure you know, they went public and then they went private again. But so they had the cash and they had the distribution channels in place to pack away. So they could buy Easter candy, last May, assuming it had the dating, right? So while their container imports are down, for instance, they're a significant customer of ours, their purchases are up because they're taking advantage of goods that are already here. And then they do one of two things. They bring it into their warehouse and they either immediately put it out in stores, or it was such a great deal for, say, Christmas 2021, they'll pack it away until October. So they are strategically, they check all the boxes as far as they have a significant number of stores. They had the cash on hand and they had the distribution channels in place, because logistics is the whole challenge and the whole name of this game right now.
Exactly. And this is actionable information. This is why I wanted you to participate in this, because you are, you're giving these amazing tips to folks out there that can use them. When you're looking at the pandemic, when you're looking at like the 99-cent stores of the world, what are the top 3 things that you've seen folks that have done it right or are changing their model to get it right?
Yeah, another great example that jumps out is Five Below. Right? It's a tween store for the most part, single price point with a $5 ceiling. Although now they have a few 10 spots, which I think is fantastic. They shifted pretty quickly. Just to talk about PPE for a minute, because everybody had to have it, either one, for their consumer, or two, what most people think about is they had to have it for their staff. You had to have masks, gloves, and sanitizers and face shields in order to stay open. And I think Five Below, they are top of the mind. They really got it right, because they continued not only their candy and their stationery and their toys, but then you could get face masks, you could get hand sanitizer. They expanded their home decor. So now you've got a 15-year-old teenager who wants to redo their bedroom because they're stuck at home. They could find that at Five Below. So it was just another example of becoming all things to everybody and as much of a one-stop shop as possible.
And one of the biggest retailers that you work with, now we all know very well in every home in America, is Amazon. They literally are all things to everyone, be it from buying your toilet paper to the third-party sellers that you help with. I've got 2 exclusive charts here for the FreightWaves audience. One on the overall Amazon import volumes throughout the United States. Brett, February's still coming in. You still see a little bit of a dip down, a slight progression. But from your experience with Amazon, with their enormous distribution channels, what are you seeing, and what are the takeaways, and what can people learn perhaps from Amazon?
One thing I love about Amazon the way is I always challenge people not to look at it as a retailer, although they are, they're a mall. If you think about why Amazon has been able to be all things to everybody and why you can get toilet paper, a towel bar, or an epoxy is because they harness the power of their consumers, right?
Most of their third-party resellers, I would venture to say, are also Amazon consumers. So if Lorianne lives in Pennsylvania and she's got a great friend who's in the snow shovel business, which is probably very applicable what's going on right now, Lorianne, is you could immediately become the retailer. You as a consumer go on, you click purchase, buy now, especially, if you're a Prime member, and Prime membership went through the roof last year. And it doesn't matter if you're buying from Lorianne, from Brett, or from Amazon. You've got the same protection. If there's an issue, Amazon stands by it. It still gets there in some cases within a day, if not 24 hours. So I think Amazon, as they continue to harness third-party resellers, really got it right during the pandemic, because as supply chains were delayed, and the one thing I think people don't always talk about is if you look at numbers in January and February of 2020, Asia started to shut down Q4 as everything started to break. The pandemic, it hit Asia obviously a lot harder and earlier than it hit us in the beginning. So all of a sudden, you couldn't get goods out of Asia. And then when you did is when you started to see the backlog, and then April, May, and June, you had retailers in the United States blanketly cancel everything. We got notifications, I would say probably from 60% of our retailers, they just canceled everything blanketly. And that they wanted to purchase, they redid. What that did is it gave Amazon resellers, it gave companies like a Marmax or a Marshalls the advantage, the opportunity to capitalize on that, bring in the merchandise. So all of a sudden, you're a small importer selling to a retailer who canceled. Guess what? You got to pivot pretty quickly and get on Amazon because the consumer still needs the product. So it was actually an interesting time to be a consumer because I think in a lot of cases, prices went down. Which I always say, I always joke it's a good time to be a consumer because we're more of an educated consumer than we ever were in the past. And that's another thing that Amazon really did.
It's true. And, it like the last chart of our discussion really hits on everything that you just talked about the timeline. The Beijing Century Joyo volume, which is predominantly their third-party sellers. When you look at it, going in 2020, of course, you had the precipitous drop because of COVID. And then starting in March, once that the ports opened, that dramatic surge, if you will, of imports. And then it peaked up in August. And then it has slowly gone down. But I wanted to touch base with you because when you're looking at the drop, starting from September all the way down to January, are you helping more as it relates to the supply for the third party sellers? What are you seeing from them? Because based on the inventory that I'm seeing here with the imports, it's really low. So I'm just trying to get a pulse point from you to see what you might be saying.
Absolutely. And the correlation isn't so black and white with the third party resellers
because they're agile enough that they can bring in a very small quantity, right? Where a traditional retailer can't import 24 pillows, a stay-at-home parent who has a great Amazon store out of their basement in Chicago, they can be flexible enough. They can bring in 20 different items and 24 of each, sell through it very quickly, a little bit of retail arbitrage, and use that money to fund the growth of the business. Again, Amazon was great there. But the other thing is if you look at April, May, and June, just a massive shift from brick and mortar retail to e-tail. Marshalls opened up their e-tail site first time in their company's history, which has always been a challenge. How do you replicate the treasure hunt, right? Macy's was another great example. Macy's, in a matter of 24 hours, they had an 85% increase on the SKUs they had online because they said, let's stick 4 employees in a closed store and we'll just pull right off the shelf versus what's in our retail. So you found retailers taking advantage of the existing inventory to supplement the amount of containers that were coming in. Lorianne, it almost caused a supply chain whiplash, right? People weren't panic buying toilet paper. People were panic buying everything. We found with our customers, there was a 4x growth in units per cart. So instead of going in and buy 1, we bought 4. You bought 4 pair of pajamas. You bought 4 bottles of bubbles for your kids. Fill in the blank here, right? It wasn't just toilet paper, it was everything. So those that were flexible enough and knew how to take advantage of the pockets in the market on where the product was, right? There were containers coming in, it was heavy in certain categories. So if you could take advantage of that and supplement, with third-party resellers, for instance, Amazon, then you as a consumer didn't miss a beat. You could still buy video cables. You could still buy gaming headphones, whatever you needed to keep sanity during this lockdown and keep our kids busy. You could find it online.
When you talk about being locked down, right? It started last year, right at the beginning of spring. We're still locked down in many aspects of it. We had so many people buy products last year for spring and summer. We're heading now into another season. How are inventory levels that you're seeing? And are people coming to you for certain items to stock up on the shelves, perhaps on some summer items that normally would be coming in by now, but it's not because of the congestion?
So with the exception of PPE, which I think that's a great outlier, right? And I touched on that earlier. If you look at how many people got into the PPE business, whether they just stumbled into it by accident trying to help somebody or just find a need in the market, right?
Everything else is you're finding a need for DIY, right? You're finding a need for home storage because people are still at home. People are buying more. What you're not seeing is you're not seeing an abundance and excess merchandise in the market right now. So to answer your question, retailers are taking advantage. Retailers are consuming, right? They've got to have the product for their consumers. So whatever they can find of an opportunity, they have to take advantage of it. Like I said, the influx of containers is down, but consumerism isn't down. Consumerism, to some degrees, is at an all-time high, right? There are certain items that will be here after we lock down, and I think you'll find a slowdown in other categories. But if the retailer backloaded it, right? Let's use weights, right? You can't find a 15-pound dumbbell in the market to save your life right now. So that is typically a February, March business because everybody buys a gym membership for the holidays. And by February and March, they're pooped out of it and they start buying home exercise. There's no home exercise right now, right? So retailers have to start buying, but they have to start flying in what they can as well because they have to be first to market in some cases. How many dumbbells are you going to buy, right? How many pairs of yoga pants are you going to buy? So it'll be interesting to see what categories stay strong as the world slowly starts to open.
And you mentioned flying. I'm speaking with companies now, bike owners, cutlery, even hot tubs. They're being flown in because you've got a small window for seasonality, and you got to get those products in on that shelf now because you might not be able to sell them, in the 60 to 90 days you're waiting, right, for these items to come in. I was very surprised to hear about back to school. Tell the audience normally when you hear from clients of, for back to school items and what you're actually experiencing now.
So we typically ship back to school May and June, so it can be on the shelves, pretty quickly because as a parent, as we buy it in August because our kids change their mind quite a few times with what they want. Back to school for us started in January and even a little bit earlier. One, because it's a constant flow. Back to school this year is not necessarily a backpack and crayons. It's a webcam, it's a round light, it's a desk chair, a lot of flat pack furniture. Everybody needs desks for their kids. We've all shifted, and whether it's our dining room table, or our living room, it's become a home office as well as back to school. That played into it very much so as well, because as the world shut down, so did offices, right? So all of a sudden, back to school became home office, where I think the home office, to some degree, was a dying room in all of our houses, but now it's been revived, right? Which leads into even something bigger. It's not even just stationery. People want to paint. People want to put decals on their walls. People want a vase, right? People want their backdrop on Zoom to look good, so they might accessorize. It's a much broader category this year with no signs of slowing down, especially as parents, as we don't know
I live in Florida, and I couldn't tell you if my children will be back in person learning in August, or they'll be communicating through Zoom.
Exactly. I mean, when it comes to reliability, that's been thrown out the window because of COVID. Our last nugget of info here, Brett, and you've been fantastic. What is the last nugget of information from a supply chain retailer perspective to help restore some sort of semblance of reliability into a supply chain?
I think they have to throw all traditional forecast models out the window, right? A traditional retailer, if you use PPE again, so you sell 1 million masks in one month. The traditional retail model is to quickly buy more. I think retailers need to be more agile and more flexible than ever, and understand that what's hot today is going to change very quickly, right? There are certain things that will stay, regardless of what happens with the vaccine rollout. We're all in some form or another restricted for another 6, 8, 10, 12 months. So there are certain categories that will work, like the DIY and the home decor. But I think a traditional retailer who plans, Christmas 2021 in January of 2021 needs to change. They need to be able to adapt to their consumer. They need to be able to get more items online, right? Because the whole paradigm has shifted. Do I think consumer behavior will come back? Absolutely, Lori. And I for one cannot wait to break out my front door and hit them all. But I do think there's a certain percentage of consumers, at least for the next 12 months, that are going to focus on click and buy. Maybe it's BOPIS, right? Buy online, pick up in store. But the retailers need to be able to shift to the consumer. And now more than ever, what we want as a consumer changes weekly.
And also, too, like looking at your supply chain in terms of the logistics, I should say, you might have to fly some stuff in. I think you really have to kind of break down your array of products to see, does it make sense to fly something in versus steam shipping in?
Agreed, because even with air freight, up 3x, it's still in some terms cheaper than going to Long Beach. And even if you go to Long Beach, you're behind 60 ships that are waiting to get in for the last, 8, 10, 12 weeks. So air freight is good in certain cases. Like you had mentioned a few items in the beginning.
Expensive cutlery is great because it's a high price item and it's light. A hot tub can be great because it's a high priced item. It doesn't work if you're flying in notebooks, bedding, right? Something that can be voluminous, doesn't weigh light, and the consumer isn't expensive. It works if you're flying in a $1,200 bedspread. It doesn't work if you're flying in $40 bed in a bag. So, but you are absolutely right. Retailers have to take a close look at it, because not only do they have to weigh out the 3x cost, they have to weigh out the time. And if that 3x gets it in so much quicker that they've got an extra 12 weeks to sell it, it may be absolutely worth it.
Well, listen, Brett, thank you so much for taking the time today. I'm Lori LaRocco, and thank you for joining us.